All right. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. My name is Robert. I've been here before. I do classical piano and maybe a little gospel. I'll talk about the music history, what to listen for, that sort of thing. But I want to start with something it is a very old tradition and not done too much in classical circles, which is I'm going to improvise something for you. Just going to make something up on the spot, and I need your help. So let's see. Okay, I have a receipt here. I just need a few different notes from you, if you wouldn't mind, musical notes. If you're not into reading music, you have the alphabet A through G. You can sharp them or flat them, but try to be a little bit nice to me. Like, don't make it too crazy. But any notes, anybody?
B flat.
Okay, B flat, that's good. C, okay. A few more.
F.
F, okay.
G.
Okay, I heard a G, and then you want a C minor. Well, C minor is a key. I can throw it in there sometime. Okay. C minor. Okay, I have 4 notes. B flat, C, F, G. A couple more maybe. D. D, did you say? Okay. How about one more? A. A. Very good. Okay. So let's see. We have. This is the theme. That's it. It sounds like it could be something from maybe an Italian opera, but okay. What mood or character do you want? Any requests for style in general? You want happy? Okay, can I end it happy? Maybe? But maybe the beginning won't be so happy because, yeah. Anything else? No? Okay, I guess I'll do this thing. Okay. Whatever I listen to in the car coming here influences that. So it just sounded like some regurgitated, like Donizetti, Bellini. I was listening to Italian opera, so there was some of that maybe. I'm still doing this odd program of sorts, which is, it's my tribute to the violin, because I love the violin so much, but I'm too lazy to switch instruments. Thanks to my wife who convinced me not to. And so the plan B is to play violin music in arrangement for piano, and there's just so many things. I keep finding more things, and it keeps prolonging my pretending to be a violinist. So first I'm going to play Gavotte, which is a dance from Gassec, French composer named Gassec. It's from his opera Rossini. This is it's often done as a standalone piece on violin, also flute, and other instruments. Gassec was a French composer who lived in the 1700s. And we don't hear his music that much. We should. He's a great composer. He wrote a wonderful mass and symphonies and operas especially. But the defining characteristic of this is that it's capturing this world of the French, right before the French Revolution. And if you imagine Versailles or something, and those powdered wigs they wore, that's what this is. And this is also, someone mentioned happy. I tried to end that piece with a happy mood. This is almost happy-go-lucky. It has this humorous feature, which is like, it sounds like a hiccup in there. Let me show you what I mean. So you're gonna hiccup. It's but it's just, and that happens periodically. So here is the Gavotte by Gassec. Piece, but this is from about 100 years after the late 19th century. This is Gabriel Fauré for French speakers. I don't really speak French. And this is called After a Dream, Après un rêve. It's originally a vocal piece, but it's done on the violin, on the cello, on many other instruments, and in this case, solo piano. I'm playing Percy Granger's version of the piece for solo piano. So Fauré was this composer who lived right before the Impressionists, like Debussy and Ravel. Those, by the way, Debussy did not like the word Impressionism for his music. He said that's not so accurate. But I do think that Fauré and Debussy and all those composers, you can almost hear or imagine, you know, the painters, Cézanne, Pissarro, Monet, Renoir. It just has that quality to it. It's very French in a way, maybe more so than the Gothic, I don't know. It has all these kind of very sophisticated like effects, which sound to me very, very French. So here is the song arrangement, Gabriel Fauré's After a Dream. This is a familiar piece, folk song from Ireland. It's the Danny Boy, or the Londonderry air. By the way, I do have some new pieces from since last time. I think I may have done this last time, so sorry. I wish I could learn faster, but you know. But anyway, so if it's the same stories and the same music, I'm sorry. But let's see. So Danny Boy, of course, is the famous song, the Londonderry air. The text, there are different texts to it, but maybe the most famous one is probably a father speaking to his son who's going to fight in the First World War. I'll tell you a little bit about Percy Grainger, this Australian guy who's arranged the Fauré and this one. He was a very bizarre person. Some of the things I probably won't say here, but he was an eccentric, let's just put it that way. And one of the things that he enjoyed was backpacking, to the point that when he was going on tour in Australia, his native Australia, he would backpack from one concert to another. I don't know when he practiced or took a shower or whatnot, but he would just wear his pack and, you know, show up 10 minutes before the concert, put it down and start playing. He liked physical labor, manual labor, and when he would travel by ship, would beg the crew of the ship to let him shovel coal in the boiler room. So he was an interesting, and there's some recordings of his, which are extraordinary. Brilliant and bizarre person, you could say. So here's his version of Oh Danny Boy. Here's a short piece by Rachmaninoff, and this is called Margaritki in Russian, Daisies. It's originally also a song for voice and piano, but he arranged it immediately after for piano solo. Violinists play it a lot, I think cellists too, so it's a popular piece in different arrangements as well. So Rachmaninoff wrote this in 1916, which is of course 1 year before the Russian Revolution, and he got out with his family. He was, he had some aristocratic lineage. It didn't really help him because his father, I read that his father gambled away the family money when he was a boy, so he didn't really grow up with a lot of wealth and privilege. But seeing that the situation with communist revolution was not going to be a good one for them, they got out. Eventually ended up in this country. But you read Rachmaninoff's letters, and he was a very nostalgic person. Maybe a lot of Russian culture is like that. My mother's from Russia originally, so kind of have that. I know the culture a little bit. I don't really speak the language, it's a shame, but Rachmaninoff, even being in Russia, he was so nostalgic, melancholy a lot of the time. Maybe today he would be diagnosed with something like depression or something. So, but I believe that this piece is it's about his memories of childhood when he would spend his summers with his grandmother in the countryside near Novgorod, north of Moscow. Because I think those were some of the happiest moments of his life. And even you look at pictures of him, he was this very tall, shaved head, never smiled. He was very. Did I tell you the story about my grandfather meeting him? Yeah, I may have, but it's a good one, so I'll tell it. So my grandfather, my father is American. He's from Virginia, So it's his father, not my Russian grandfather. So my grandfather was an usher at a concert in Richmond where Rachmaninoff was playing. It just gives you some insight into what Rachmaninoff was like. And he was told not to let anyone through the doors, so my grandfather stood guard. And, well, somebody tried to open the door. They were sort of fighting with the door, and then the door was kicked open. And it was Rachmaninoff, 6.5 feet tall. And I tell people, this spoke to my grandfather, actually. I had this, he said 5 words. You know what they were? Get out of my way. So I have this personal connection to musical history. Yeah. Well, it was a long time ago. Something that's a little more intense. I've been working through all of Liszt's arrangements of Paganini's music. Some of them caprices for solo violin, some of them like the La Campanella from the violin, one of the violin concertos. So this is the 6th and final Liszt study based on Paganini. I've probably done at some point, I'm pretty sure I've done at least all 1 through 5 in some shape or form here, but I have not. This is a new piece for me. So a little bit about Paganini. So Paganini, a violin program like I'm doing, it wouldn't really be complete without Paganini. So Paganini was this really controversial figure, born in the late 18th century, lived into the 19th century. And remember the first piece I played, the Gasek. I mean, imagine someone like Paganini, who was wild man, like a rock star almost, coming into that world. You see, he was very iconoclastic. There were people who believed that he was possessed because the way he played, the music he wrote, even the way he looked when he played. He had this wiry hair and this gaunt face, which is, by the way, about physical features of both Rachmaninoff and Paganini. Many people nowadays speculate, some historians, they think that both of them may have had Marfan's syndrome, which Rachmaninoff contributed to his being very tall. He had very large hands, which had a lot of aches and pains too. So anyway, and Paganini was similarly built. He was very tall and lanky and odd-looking guy, and that was part of his mystique, I guess. So, but the Romantics, they just adored Paganini. So I think it was Paganini and Beethoven who the Romantics, they just worshipped them because they saw these qualities in them, the free-spirited, individualistic, wild, those things. They saw them as people who were very much in opposition to this age of enlightenment that was in the 18th century, reason and logic and Voltaire and Rousseau. Well, Paganini was not from that. And you'll see what I mean. The piece gets kind of, nutty. So this sixth study of Liszt is based on the 24th Caprice by Paganini, which is a famous theme and variations. Maybe you've heard the original. It's a famous theme. And it's famous because Rachmaninoff, Brahms, many others have used that as the basis for their compositions. So, now Franz Liszt was born in 1811, so later than Paganini, and he heard Paganini perform in Paris in the 1830s, or maybe late 1820s, I think it was the 1830s, and he was just floored by what he heard. And Liszt was kind of in a low point of his life when he encountered Paganini. I don't know how you could be in Paris, but apparently you can. But so he was in this kind of depression, and he was very stuck. He had fallen in love with someone. It didn't work out really. He even tried to jump in the Seine River at one point. But he heard Paganini, and it just electrified him. And what he did after hearing Paganini was he just locked himself up to work incessantly at the piano. And during this period, he arranged Paganini because he wanted to translate the virtuosity, the fire that Paganini played violin with into the piano. So here it is, the Paganini Liszt study number 6, based on the solo violin Caprice number 24. So you see why people thought he was possessed, you know? I think it even today, it even sounds wild and, you know, just out of the blue. I'm now going to play the first movement of César Franck's Violin Sonata, arranged for piano solo, of course, because I didn't bring a violin or violinist with me. This is Alfred Cortot's solo piano version of that. Just the first movement today, because I'm still working on the others. I swore I'd never do this piece, because I played it with this wonderful violinist named Eric McCracken. We did it recently, a few months ago. And I thought, why would anyone want to play it solo piano? But I just wanted to, I didn't want to part with the piece really, and wanted to explore it from that angle. And so I ended up learning it, so some of it. So the César Franck, the Franck Sonata, which is not to be confused with Frank Sinatra. It just sounds like sometimes people say, are you going to play some Frank Sinatra? Well, it's a little different. Franck was like Fauré. He was a French composer, actually Belgian, but lived in France. Lived in the late 19th century. And Franck was, unlike Mozart, he wrote all his great works after the age of like 68 or 70. He was like a later bloomer, like Mozart by that point. I need to say, he was dead by 35, Mozart. Schubert, who was 31. But Franck just wrote all these masterpieces in his later years. The Symphony in D minor, a lot of the great organ, he was a great organist too. So this sonata, he wrote one, that's why it's the Franck violin sonata. There was a conversation between Sviatoslav Richter, one of my favorite pianists ever, and David Oistrakh, who was a violinist, one of my favorite violinists. So they were in disagreement about this piece. They played it together, and David Oistrakh said, this is beautiful drawing room music. Okay. Richter said, this is Marcel Proust in music. I was really taken by that reference, that comparison. So I looked into it, and it turns out, yes, in Swann's Way by Marcel Proust, there's a fictional violin sonata, which is heavily symbolic in the novel. And many people think that it's based on the Franck. Probably is. Because this sonata was so, such a big cultural thing. It still is now, but especially at the turn of the 20th century. The Franck sonata, also Wagner, because there's kind of an influence of Wagner here. Wagner was also an awful person, but anyway. So, okay, one more thing about this. The way this music develops, it's very different from other music. Because it doesn't really go in like a straight line, if that makes sense. It's like Proust's writing. Proust does not have a narration or a narrative with a plot and a, character development. Not really. It's more like these long stream of consciousness, like, memories. That's what Proust's writing is. And that's what this sonata is like to me. I call it the dream sequence sonata or something like that, because it's like in movies, the flashbacks, it's like that. And it's not like a Beethoven or Brahms that has a logical, development of things. It's just not. So here is the first movement of César Franck violin sonata adapted for solo piano by Courtauld. Now, this is a very famous piece. It's from the it's called the Meditation from Thais by Massenet. And this is, it's usually done on violin, because in the opera in Thais, it's an orchestral and solo violin interlude that occurs throughout the opera. It's not sung, actually. So because it's such a beautiful piece, you know, violinists, they play it as a separate concert piece. So Massenet's Thais, he wrote it in 1891. It's not done too much. I think maybe Renee Fleming sang it. Apparently it's very hard to sing. So, but it's a great opera. I should see it. I've heard about it. So the story of Thais, it takes place in Alexandria, Egypt, at the end of the Roman Empire. And Thais is this woman who worships the goddess Venus, or just the Greco-Roman gods and goddesses, really. And there's this early Christian monk who tries to convert her, and in the process he falls in love with her, because it's an opera, you know, you have to have that sort of thing. And so this is, I didn't know there was a solo piano version. I just found it online someday. You know, I don't even know who did it. Maybe Massenet himself. But here it is. Usually done on violin, of course. not so little piece. This is the Liebesfreude, Love's Joys, by Fritz Kreisler, arranged by Rachmaninoff again. So Kreisler, I may have done the Liebesleid, Love's Sorrows here before. But this is a waltz, but it's a Viennese waltz, so it has a little tipsiness to it. It's got a lilt. A regular waltz is 1, 2, 3, 1, but a Viennese waltz has got sort of a like you know. That's a Viennese waltz. It has that, you know. It's not so steady. Kreisler, you know, was embodied La Belle Époque, the turn of the 20th century, the culture of Vienna. And there's a word for that called Gemütlichkeit, which means coziness or contentment. Someone I know who's from Austria explained it to me. He said, if you're sitting by the fireplace drinking hot chocolate and it's snowing outside and you're happy for it, that's Gemütlichkeit. So that's Kreisler's whole, you know, thing. But he was Jewish, and when the Nazis took power in the 1930s, he got out. He came to America, and there he became fast friends with Rachmaninoff, another exile from his country. And they, well, more on them later, but I'll play the piece first. So yeah, it's a violin piece, but Rachmaninoff, of course, adapts it very heavily. Adapts it. It's more like an improvisation on the actual piece for violin. So here it is, Rachmaninoff's version of Kreisler's Liebesfreude, Love's Joys. I'm going to do a little gospel, but maybe first I'll do one more crazy Paganini piece, which I've done here before, La Campanella, which is the little bell. It's called that because it's, it's imitating the sound of a little bell that rings constantly. Remember when we had the cicadas out, and now they're gone? This also reminds me of those buzzing cicadas. It's almost obnoxious at times. So it has that mood to it. So I'll play this, and then another Paganini list, and then some gospel, so, which is very different. Or maybe it's not that different. Because music's all music, Same chords. All right. improvisation on a very, very old gospel tune called Never Grow Old. So here it is. Explanation, I told you my mother's Russian, but my dad is like a 9th generation Virginian. So growing up, the classical music came through my mom, you know, and my uncle Boris, who was a wonderful novelist and wonderful uncle. And I lost him recently, he died recently, but they encouraged me to, you know, play classical music. But my father, who plays guitar and sings country gospel, you know, he said, you know, Robert, he kind of lost his accent, you know, but he said, like, when are you going to play some real music? So I said, okay, I've got to do that too. So that's the explanation. So now I'm going to play a piece, this is very familiar, When the Saints Go Marching In. I'm going to do it, and before I say who is in the style, I want to tell a little story about this. I mentioned the name Mahalia Jackson, great, yeah, I just adore her. I think she's, if you could say, maybe the greatest musician ever. But I said it in one place where I was playing, and some guy in the very back started laughing hysterically. I was upset. I was really, because I love Mahalia Jackson, and I got in the car and it hit me. He thought I said Michael Jackson. I just want to be clear, it's Mahalia Jackson. Mahalia Jackson was, you know, an old school gospel singer. She was very close with Martin Luther King Jr. Even inspired the I Have a Dream speech. It was she who,
That's right.
because he prepared this speech at the March on Washington. And it was a good speech, but it wasn't, catching.
That's right.
And she was right behind him and she said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." Dramatic scenes together. I mean, really. And so, Precious Lord, the great song, the great gospel hymn by Thomas Dorsey, was written for her. And she sang it at Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. So, the depth of, not only as a musician, but as a human being, Mahalia Jackson. So I'm going to try to emulate, I can't do everything her voice does on this box, but, try to emulate the style she does it. It's a little story about when the saints go marching. It's a famous song, but it has many lyrics, I found, and they're very apocalyptic lyrics. They're dark. It's originally a spiritual from the dark period of our history of slavery, but it was sung very slowly originally. And then when the New Orleans brass bands started playing, I guess, at funerals at the turn of the 20th century, it became more upbeat. Because the funerals in New Orleans, nothing in New Orleans is too heavy, it's upbeat and uplifting celebration of life. So that up-tempo version, you hear Louis Armstrong sing it, and Mahalia Jackson, who's from New Orleans originally. That's a later development. So anyway, I might put at the very end another famous Southern gospel tune, the "I'll Fly Away." I'll add that in maybe, just to... So here's an attempt at some, but we're going to close with this, because I thank you for coming and for, dealing with my corny jokes and everything. I have one, by the way, if you like corny jokes.
Yeah.
They're called dad jokes, because I'm a dad, so it just comes to you naturally. Like, and this is true, actually. We had a spider in the bathtub yesterday. So my wife said, she's a pianist, great pianist herself. She said, "Please take it out. Don't kill him, but take him out." Okay, this is where it's not true, but that was true. But I thought about this whole joke. So yeah, I took him out. Bought him a beer. Great guy. You know what he does? He's a web designer. Okay. But in all seriousness, I'm going to close with this with "When the Saints" and maybe "I'll Fly Away" a little bit. Well, have a great evening. Go in peace.
Amazing.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Appreciate it.
Too kind.